Hi guys and welcome back to Dice Down Gaming. Today I've got a video on my top tips for playing Warmachine Mark 4. I used to play in Mark 2. I played Crick and then Circle and then Scorn locally to me. When Mark 3 came in, sadly the game sort of fell away, so I sold my stuff and I've been back at Mark 4 since January. I've been doing decently. I've got to two finals of Steamrollers, played in a War Table League where I did quite well. And I just sort of thought I'd put a video together on my thoughts on how I've done so far and what maybe I would have been helpful for me to hear when I rejoined the game. Before I get into that, a big thank you to anyone who subscribed to my channel. I'm approaching 500, still a little while to go, but getting there faster than I thought I would. A massive thank you again, and if you like what I'm doing and you haven't subscribed yet, I'd be really grateful if you could subscribe. So let's get on to what I think would be helpful tips for me, for myself to hear when I first rejoined the game. First of all, the first turn choice. I think it's very easy, especially if you're playing a friend and you're playing really casually and you roll the dice and you just want to stay where you are, so you stay where you are. For I can get behind that when you're playing after a long day at work and you just want to roll some dice with your friends. I can get behind just sticking to the table side. But I just wanted to speak a bit more about how it can really impact the game and how it can really change the game and maybe decide if you win and lose a game, deciding if you go first or second. So first of all, obviously, if you pick to go first, your opponent's going to pick table side, and if you pick to go second, you're going to get table side. So what should sort of you be thinking about when you're picking to go first or second? So first of all, I would look at the map and the terrain. I've got a preloaded map up here on War Table, and we've got a hill, an obstruction, various pieces. If you look at the table and you think there's a side that's going to be massively hindering to you, maybe you want to pick second, and you want to avoid that table side. Vice versa, if there's a table side to you which is really helpful for you, say you've got lots of prow, and in this map there's plenty of forest to conceal that prow, well, to trigger that prow and get concealment to give you stealth, you might think, okay, I want to pick table side and I like to go first. On top of that, you want to be thinking of scenario. Um, on the war table, fortunately, that the flags are normally placed in a way that where there's quite even decision. But when you go to an event and say you're playing payload or you're playing color guard, the flag placement is really, really important. And we hope that all the TOs give you equal opportunity to place your flags, but that isn't the case every tournament you go to. So, for example, if you're playing color guard or trench warfare, you might really want to look at where the flags will be placed and what options you'll have to choose your objective terrain, and also what options you'll have in color guard to move your flag around, and in payload, how far away is your terrain going to be that you have to push that payload into. That's another thing you want to think about when you're deciding first turn. And then as well, you need to think about what your opponent's sort of army list could be. What you think, obviously at this point, you know your opponent's army list. So what army list have they picked? And how aggressive slash defensive is it? Could you give away first turn and not be punished? For example, if you're playing, say, a slower faction, say Orgoth, if you give them first turn, they may not be able to pressure you so much on their turn two, and then you get the advantage of picking table side. Say your opponent is playing a really hard, fast alpha list, giving them turn one might be a risk because you might get pushed right into your deployment zone. If your opponent say gets to the middle line and you can barely move out of your deployment zone, you might really struggle on scenario going forward then. As well as that, you need to think about obviously second player is going to be the first one to score. Are you playing a scenario list where you want to you're aiming for scenario and controlling that scoring is really important. All those things you need to take into account, which I appreciate a lot when thinking to go first or second. I'm sure you've had games yourself where you've just you've rolled the dice. You go first, mate. I'll take second, and I'm gonna stay where I am. And then after that first turn, you think, bugger, I wish I had taken first. Now, again, I appreciate if you're just playing casually, you're just playing with a buddy, and you just want to roll some dice, don't worry about table side. Just you do you. But in terms of improving your own play, thinking about turn one, who's going to go first and second, can really help your game in a lot of ways. It might help your scenario play because you've looked at a map, you've looked at where the flags can go, and you get a favourable choice of flag. It might help you unpack your army because suddenly you've not got an obstruction that you didn't want there. You say you're an army with a lack of pathfinder, and you pick a side that's got three forests on, two forests. That might hinder unpacking your army. And on top of that, then you think about what style of army you're going to play. If you're playing to have a heavy alpha army that wants to dictate the pace of the game, maybe you want to take first regardless, and you want to really try and pin your opponent's army into their deployment, and then try and control scenario. Are you playing someone who is slow? Maybe giving them first turn isn't so much punishment. But it's just something that when I came back to the game, I didn't give much thought to. I rolled a dice, and most of the time I'd stay on the side I am. Maybe I wanted to go first because the list I was trying, I wanted to go first, and I would take first. But the more games I played, the more I realised that it's a really crucial decision point for the game, and something that I initially overlooked as part of the game. So to sum up, the four things are: you want to look at the terrain placement, you want to look at the scenario in relation to the terrain placement, you want to look at what sort of army list is my opponent playing, and then think about what sort of list you're playing in terms of, do you want to control? Are you defensive? Do you want to alpha? Think of all of them and try and take into account when you're thinking who is going to go first and who is going to go second. And I think when you're making better decisions about the first turn, it makes your whole game easier in turn. Next up is scenario. Scenario. I can't really overstate how important I've found uh, playing scenario is. I appreciate in Warmachine there's a lot going on. You're trying to manage your army, what you want to do in your turn, what you think your opponents can do on their turn, where they might score, where you might contest, and then obviously you're trying to play the best turn you can every turn. What I found myself doing is it can be really easy to lose sight of scenario. I was fortunate enough to play in the finals of the Bad Moon Cafe Steamroller I attended last weekend. I lost 11-8 in scenario on round 6 in the final to David. Fantastic game, fantastic guy, fantastic player. There were a couple of turns where I did not score a point where I could have. For example, there was a turn 2 for me where I moved some things up. I killed a model that was contesting a 50mm objective. I didn't think I would kill that model, but I didn't leave myself place to put some in range to score that objective. That was one point that I lost sight of, and when you lose 11-8, that one point would have hindered that loss. There was another turn where one of my heavies got beat back off an objective. Now I've got a spell called Fortify which negated that. Again, one point given up that I didn't need to. And in really close games where you've got equal skilled opponents and you're fighting for every point, losing sight of one point can be really costly. On top of that, I often find you can win by scenario more often if you're actively playing for it, which sounds dumb. And but I would say when I was first playing Warmachine Mark 4, I wasn't actively playing for it. I was taking my turn, I was trying to kill my opponent's models, and as an afterthought, I would try and put some models on objectives to score them or contest them. Now, the approach that I'm taking is that my turn plan is around scenario, and what models do I need to remove to score that objective and achieve that goal. In the steamroller last weekend, I won my first two games on scenario and narrowly lost on scenario. And I think it's a really, really important part of the game to try and keep in mind. So when I take my turn now, what I tend to do before I've gone onto my maintenance and control, and if I've got things to resolve in a maintenance, I try and keep this in mind, is that what am I going to score and what am I going to contest on my turn? One thing that I did say wrong early on is that in my mind I had to contest everything. So I would run models across the table into really bad positions just to stop my opponent scoring a point. And while it's true, you do want to try and contest as much as you can. You don't always need to contest everything every turn. If you look at the different scenarios, such as trench warfare, I've got up here. There's a lot of points on offer. There's 2 points, 4 points for the objectives. Then there's 2 points for your opponent's cash, and then there's a flag which is good for 2 points. So there's 8 points available in a turn. So contrast that to payload, where there's 4 objectives which you can score, which are worth one each. And if you push your opponent's objective into their flag terrain or building or you're going to get a bonus 3 points. But most of the time on payload, your opponent might have 2 points access to them, say their objective. You've got your 2 points, and you might be able to contest one. So you're going to score like say 1 or 2 points a turn. Whereas trench warfare, there could be an 8 point swing on a really big turn if they control everything, which is unlikely but could happen. So while you do need to contest things, you don't need to contest everything every turn. You don't need to throw away your army to contest everything. What you want to do is you want to look at the scenario. How many points can we score on this scenario each turn? And then obviously the game is to score more points than your opponent. But if you're a defensive army, uh, maybe for turn 2 and 3 you want to score as many points as your opponent's army and leverage your gun line or your defensive tech to get ahead and then score more points later in the game. If you're an alpha army, you might be looking to score more points early on. And as your army sort of wears away, as a bit of a glass cannon, you hit very hard and it wears away, you might score less points. But a mistake I made was trying to sort of give up my army to contest everything. What we want to do is we want to work out how many points we think we're going to score in our turn, how many points we think our opponent might score in their turn, and we want to try and score more. But not necessarily give up away our army to do so. On top of that, I think something that's quite unique to Warmachine is that both players score every turn. If you think maybe Sigma or 40k, even Horus Heresy, I don't know if you played these games, but most other tabletop games, you take your turn and you score on your turn, and then that's done, and your opponent scores. In Warmachine, you score on both turns. So when you're thinking of a scenario, if you want to contest something, maybe you need to think about, okay, I can contest it on my turn, normally very easy. You can remove things and then put models in place. But am I going to contest that for my opponent's turn? And do I need to? If I put one Marauder crew in range of an objective, that would deny my opponent scoring it for my turn. But it's very unlikely to deny my opponent scoring it for their turn. And you sort of need to look at your army as a resource in some terms of contesting power. Obviously, their main objective is to remove your opponent's army and you score everything. That's not possible in every game. And sometimes you sort of need to look at your army as a resource to how much can I deny my opponent by not giving too much of my own resource to score my own objectives. And I do appreciate that, it's very hard to do it because sometimes there's so much going on in a game of Warmachine. Trench Warfare is a great example. There's 8 things we're trying to manage, and we're trying to manage our own army, trying to manage our opponent's army. We've probably got a clock ticking, and we're aware that we want to get our turns done faster rather than sooner. But if you're actively trying to score a scenario and you're actively playing for a scenario, I think you'll find that you'll be picking up points a lot easier than playing it sort of as an afterthought, and it will really raise your game because you might even pick up more scenario wins than you currently are when you're actively playing for it. I've sort of really enjoyed playing more for scenario. Assassination is a great way to play the game, but you can't always assassinate. But I say you can always score points, and by prioritizing the scenario, I think you're going to be playing a better game. Now we've picked the appropriate going first or second, and we've got ourselves on a good side of the table. We've got a good game plan for our army. We're going to alpha hard maybe, and we're trying to limit our opponent's scoring. Then every turn, our main priority before we move things is we're going to focus on what are we going to score, what are we going to contest, what do we need to contest. We're going to try and score more than our opponent, but we're not going to give away our army just to deny their opponent scoring. And if we sort of got defensive tech, we might want to leverage that. We might want to just score the same as our opponent every turn for the first, say, 2, 3 turns, and then score more later in the game when we've leveraged our range and our sort of defensive capability to get ahead in the game. Thirdly, and this one might sound really obvious, but practice makes perfect. I think Warmachine is a game where you can call it a bit of a lifestyle game or a bit of a main game or you know a solo, not a solo game, but it can take up a lot of your mental space in your tabletop hobby, maybe, is a good way to put it. Um, there's a lot to take in terms of your own rules, the scenario, your army rules, the core rules, command cards, the spell rack, um, and all of that you're trying to subconsciously keep track of during a game to make the best decisions possible. The more you do that, the easier all that comes. As well, playing on clock. Obviously, when you're newer to the game, you probably won't be playing on clock. But when you want to move to, say, tournament practice, or you want to start attending steamrollers, which I would thoroughly recommend, you are then going to have to deal with playing on the clock. And the more you can get those processes in your mind of, I've got these command cards, I'm not going to think about what they are, because I know that I've got these five, and when the appropriate scenario comes up, I'll use them correctly, you hope. That will, reduce your mental load. But the more you practice, the more you'll get used to all these things. You'll get used to your own army rules and not having to constantly think about what this model does or what it can do or where should I put it. Will really help your game. And then you can start thinking more about what your opponent can do, and be sort of proactive rather than reactive. Um, you can then start thinking about, okay, well, I know what my stuff does. I'm then going to focus about what my opponent's stuff does, and that is a massive part of the game in Warmachine, is knowing what your opponent can do and what their list can do and what your opponent's warcaster's feat is and threat range is and etc. Um, Without a clock, you could ask all these questions and you could play sort of a 3 4 hour game, take it very slowly. Power to you. If you're practicing, there's no problem doing that. But when we're transitioning to sort of playing steamrollers and tournament games, we're going to try and do all of this in a manageable time. For 100 points, you get an hour on the clock. And the more you practice, the quicker it'll come. The better choices you'll make in terms of, say, first, second turn. The better choices you'll make in terms of what scenario plays you're going to make, what you're going to contest, and what you're going to score. And your clock is all going to be a bit easier. It's all going to be a bit more familiar with you. And overall, your gameplay is going to improve. Say, last but not least, is that sometimes we can maybe lose sight of why we're playing the game. With War Machine being so involved, I feel like I, at least, and a lot of other people, put a lot of effort into playing the game. I spend a lot of time writing lists. I love writing different lists and look at different army factions and what can they do and what can I do. And then you've got all this mental load we just spoke about. We're gonna be trying to imagine a scenario, managing clock. We picked a right side. We picked to go first or second. We manage our opponent's threat ranges. I think sometimes after a game, say you win or lose, you can come away and wow, that was tiring. That took a lot from me. And I think certainly when you lose, sometimes you think, damn, so 50 minutes really giving it my all, and you end up with a loss. But I'd say, the game ultimately is escapism from real life, from work, from stresses. Don't let this become another stress in your life. Previously I was very lucky enough to be a captain for Team England at Guild Ball. And prior to that, I would say that it got to the point where winning a game for me was more important than enjoying the game. And if I didn't win the game, maybe I didn't enjoy it as much. And I think we should use these tools like War Machine and tabletop and any hobby to escape the pressures and the stresses and everything we've got going in real life. And use it purely as an enjoyment tool. So even though we've put a lot of effort into it, we've learned our rules, we've learned our opponent rules, we're playing on clock. Both of you and your opponent want to win. You're both doing your best to deny your opponent's win. When we finish the game, which can be easier said than done, let's all just try and remember that we're playing ultimately for enjoyment. The social time of your opponent is giving you is really important. People's time is really valuable, and we should all be trying giving our opponents the best game we can and valuing their time as much as we can. I think War Machine Mark 4 is in a really, really good state. If you look at the win rates for sort of factions, of Mark 4 factions since the January update, we're sort of between 55% and 45% for all the Mark 4 factions. So that's really, really good. Any faction you play, you can have a good chance of, going even. And, those higher skilled players with higher skill expression, whatever you pick, you've probably got a great chance of winning the event you're going to. So it ended up being a bit of a ramble today. I just wanted to sort of summarize maybe what I would have liked to known and told myself 6 months ago when I started playing the game again. Um, for me, I've got Welsh Masters coming up, so I'm painting my list for that. Currently, I'm going to play Foul Blood and Firequill. That might change. I'm just loving playing the game, looking at crits for a second faction, which I said I wouldn't do until the new year, but we'll see how well that holds up. If you've got this far into the video, thank you much for joining me today on a bit of a ramble. Hopefully, I'll see you in the next one very soon.